Hi, everyone. This is Sonja Robinson hosting the Sun Talk Radio Show, Sustainable Urban Network, Saturdays at 3 p.m. on GODradio1.com for us to scale up our neighborhoods.
Tune in to Sun Sustainable Urban Network Talk Radio Show on GODradio1.com. Get up, get out, and get green. We can't let Earth pass us by. We got to scale up our neighborhood, y'all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another day in Sun. Happy Sun Saturday. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about our city's asset, one of the most expensive revenue generating asset that our city has, which is our utility franchise agreement, as well as what does other options look like as far as we're trying to reduce and make things more affordable here in San Diego. So this particular panel is very sensitive. They understand that environmental justice intersects directly with racial and social justice. So we want to pay respect to those that have been brutally murdered and killed by the hands of police brutality, as well as honor our social justice giants, such as Congressman John Lewis and Reverend C.T. Vivian. And in doing so, we will provide a 9-second moment of silence, and I will call out the names. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tyrone West, Sandra Bland, Robert Fuller, Rashad Brooks, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, and George Floyd. Thank you. So we understand that the work we are doing is the work to dismantle, reimagine, as far as when we look at regenerative social justice in our lives, and that includes everything. A lot of people don't think about their utilities, where it comes from, and how we can make it more affordable. Well, we're going to have that discussion today. And before we have that discussion today, as we do all of our shows, we are going to start off with our reflection to really set the tone and encompass the things we're going to be talking about today. And we also, before we jump into that, want to thank you for tuning in. Let us know what city, what state you're representing, what part of San Diego that you might be tuning in. You could be joining any show, and we appreciate you tuning in and listening to this very important topic as it affects your pockets. And for our reflection, it reads as such. Energy democracy is a way to frame the international struggle of working people, low-income communities, and communities of color to take control of energy resources from the energy establishment and use those resources to empower their communities, literally providing energy economically and politically. And this is by no other than Denise Fairchild with Emerald Cities Green. She is phenomenal, and I'm so thankful I had a chance to meet her. So that came out of her book of Energy Democracy. And as we always do, we must state what our Sun enlightenments are, and they are inspired by our modern thought teacher, Don Miguel Ruiz. And one is be responsible for your resources. 2, take the state of our environmental justice, racial and social justice seriously. 3, don't wait for others, do your part. And 4, give your best, loving, and best effort as we work towards social justice for all. So before we dive into this topic and I introduce this panel of experts, what we want to do is provide some just quick highlights and also give our shout outs of our Sunshine Award and Fossil Shade. And so as we all know who the VP ticket is, Miss Kamala Harris. And we are happy that she is bringing it and representing for all of us and energizing this ticket. So we're very happy about her pick. And I'm honored to even been acknowledged by the work I've done in this field by her office as a US Senator. Also, did you guys know that there's this long duration of dangerous heat wave that's hitting San Diego County? It's so important that all of our cities have our climate action plans updated in order to mitigate these heat waves. And another news flash I wanted to share is that San Diego has also provided information that shows that our county for the first time is actually hitting below the thresholds for COVID-19. So that's really good news, and we're really happy to hear that. As far as our announcements, I got to give it up. Did you guys see that virtual prayer vigil that the San Diego NAACP gave last night? If not, check it out. Check out the video. It was phenomenal. Great, great, great production. And hands to the committee who put it together. Also, our Environmental and Climate Justice Committee will meet September 1st, the first Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. And that's September 1st, Tuesday at 7 p.m. And also stay tuned, because this topic that we're having today, we're also going to be having a town hall addressing our city's utility franchise agreement. What about that shine? All right, so last week's show, we got to give it up to our brothers. They actually brought their voices. We had our police sergeant, Art Scott, we had our Bishop, Bowser, as well as our Barbara Bilal. So we want to give it up to them. Also, did you guys see that the San Diego has their Black Lives Matter display downtown, and it's been revealed as a art expression and support of our movement. The Rock Church and City Heights is providing groceries locally every week, even anyone who's impacted by the COVID-19. So we want to give it up and give the shine out to them as well. Now, that fossil shade, did you guys hear about the EPA rolling back those reductions in the methane emissions? So yeah, they definitely get the fossil shade this week. So now we're ready to dive into this topic, because we got some experts that's ready to really help educate, engage you on a topic that really we all use. We all use electricity, and we need to understand the different directions we can move as a city to benefit you. So before we get started on our topic, we are going to have our topic theme song. All right, so you guys know what I call those that I roll with, our climate Avengers. So definitely want to make sure that we bring them in right as they're standing up for our rights. They're standing up, wanting to make sure that you even understand your voice and how you can engage to get the best out of what we've been experiencing, because we know that our rates are the highest in the state. So the first question I want to ask, and I want Bill, he is a professional engineer, expert on this matter, on this subject matter, and I definitely want to ask him if he can kind of walk us through and explain to our viewers, what is a franchise agreement? So Bill, you're on mute.
Thank you for that tip, Sonja. I appreciate this opportunity to lead it off with a little overview of franchise agreement. I thought the way I would do that to begin is, I mean, the reason we're having this discussion is because the city of San Diego is at a point in time where they have to decide what to do with this. And so I'd like to read from our city charter, one sentence that is the whole ballgame, which is, our corporate powers, the city of San Diego may own and operate public utility systems, including the joint or sole operation and ownership of utilities for the purchase, development, and supply of water and electrical power for use of the city and its inhabitants and others. And so that's in section 1 of our city charter, our corporate power. So we have the power to either do that ourselves as a public entity, or to farm it out to someone else, to basically contract it out to a third party. And the city forever, since the 19th century, has contracted this service out, or the provision of this service, to San Diego Gas and Electric. And that describes the use by that entity, by SDG&E, the use of city property to put transmission lines, distribution lines. They also do gas, so they put gas lines underground. But we have authorized this private company, instead of doing it ourselves, to run their lines on our land, basically city land, to provide customers with power and gas. And so that's basically what it's about. We happen to have farmed it out to a private company. That private company is regulated by a commission that's supposed to keep them somewhat on a leash and not extort too much from the customers and providing the service. That's called the California Public Utilities Commission. But many of the jurisdictions around us do it themselves as a public service. The Imperial Irrigation District, Imperial County, that's public. The city of Anaheim, city of Riverside, city of Los Angeles, they are public and they provided themselves.
Sacramento too, right?
What's that?
Is it Sacramento?
Yes, right. Sacramento, there's probably 24 at least. Those are the biggest cities, but 24 at least in the state that provide this service. And where we are at is the 50-year agreement that we signed with SDG&E in 1970 is about to terminate. And we have a decision to make. And we're in the process now. It's become a bit of a controversy, a bit of an issue in town, is what do we want in the new agreement? We have a climate action plan now. We have big ambitions for clean energy. We pay the highest rates in the state. We'd like to get a break on rates, something more reasonable. We want more cooperation from the utility. Do we want another private utility to come in, or do we want to do it ourselves? And so that's where we're at as a city.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. Now I need to reel it back in because I gave you guys that prompt Climate Avenger theme song, but I also realized that I didn't officially introduce who the panel is. So I want to make sure our viewers know exactly who is speaking on this topic. So we have Bill Powers, and he is a professional engineer, as I mentioned before. He's also on the board of Protect Our Communities and many other organizations, as well as a true social justice ally and activist on this movement. We also have Eddie Price. He is the president and CEO of San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition, and he is on the board, president of the Advisory Council for San Diego's Community Power. As well as other involvement as well. We have Dr. Cody Petterson. He is the president of San Diego County's Democratic Club Dems for Environmental Action, and he is on a slew of other environmental boards and members, and also a very strong ally as well as an activist in the move for social and racial justice. And we also have Dr. Darwin Fishman. He is one of the co-founders of our Racial Justice Coalition here in San Diego, as well as a lecturer for sociology from the University of California, San Diego, and S.U.N, as well as he's a member of our Environmental Climate Justice Committee and many other groups and affiliations. So they are definitely a wealth of not only knowledge, but as well as not just experience, but actually action. So definitely wanted to make sure our viewers know exactly the background of those that we're going to be speaking to today. Now, Cody, I want to ask you, and when we're looking at our neighboring cities, and those, as Bill mentioned, that are actually public utilities, can you kind of explain to us what's the difference of what we have with having a monopoly and a regulatory energy company, which he mentioned too, is the highest rates in the state of California. And we know that the city, or not just the city, but the county of San Diego has such a affordability issue, right? We have a huge disparity of the millionaires, the haves, and those that are just really struggling just to from affordability perspective here in the county. Can you explain to us like our neighboring cities, such as LA, which is not too far from us, and many others that have a public utility company, and what that can look like in replacement, or what as an option here in San Diego?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our rates are almost double the rate of Sacramento ratepayers, SMUD in Sacramento. There are a lot of reasons that we may be able to get into some of them later on in the panel. But by and large, SDG&E is not only an investor-owned utility, it has been very proficient in manipulating the California Public Utility Commission process, the CPUC process. And so really, once you have a franchise, it's very difficult to escape transferring resources from working ratepayers to shareholders of those investor-owned utilities. And the thing to remember, whatever criticisms one has of SDG&E and Sempra, and we have many, you've got to always remember the core problem with an investor-owned utility is that their reason for existing is generating value for shareholders. That's it. So, I mean, even if miraculously you had a board member or you had a CEO that said, you know what, we actually want to provide something more for our community. We actually want to take some of our profits and invest a disproportionate amount in workers or invest a disproportionate amount in reducing rates. You would get a private equity firm like Elliott Management would come in right away. They would identify that gap and they would see an opportunity for profit. They would do a leverage buyout and take it over. So there is an inherent problem in an investor-owned utility. They are geared to generate massive profits for their shareholders, which means expropriating money from working families and using it. And in San Diego, we pay roughly $1 million a day profit from working San Diego a day, $1 million a day profit from working San Diego families directly into the pockets of SDG&E or Sempra's shareholders.
Right, and that's profit, not revenue, people.
That's
so this
profit.
is after cost. This is after cost. So, Eddie, I would like to ask you if you want to chime in and give us some of your thoughts of this opportunity we have, because we're really at an opportunity as our city is negotiating this franchise agreement and what this franchise agreement can mean to our communities.
Well, first of all, $1 million a day profit is a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that's $1 million a day profit every day.
Right.
So there's like 300, from what I heard, there's 365 days in a year.
That's right.
So that's $365 million minimum profit. Now, I don't know about, other communities, but we could use that profit that goes to us.
Yes.
SDG&E's normal conversation is they don't make any money off of buying and selling energy.
I've heard that same line. Yeah.
But apparently they make $1 million a day. And to be honest to them, I wouldn't want to lose that either after I've promised my shareholders to a 10% increase in their investment every year, no matter what. But what that could do for our community, and when I say our community, I mean all of SDG&E's service territory, not just communities of concern necessarily, but all of the territory. It would mean a lot of money. It would mean a lot of opportunity, specifically for communities of concern, but for the general community at large, right? We'd have to really figure out a way and a strategy to spend that money, right? It's not like you can just take $20 and go to the store and that's it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of need there, right? Where that money can actually help close that gap. You know?
And close quite a few gaps, right? Mm-hmm. In the energy industry, the energy world, one thing I find real interesting in this industry is that it actually makes money, right? Every time the sun comes up, it at least generates $1 million worth of revenue somewhere every day, right?
Well, actually, probably more than that.
Right. But let's just work with that number because when you start talking about larger numbers, it really starts to get hard to grasp. We're talking about $10 million a day, every day. But $1 million, though it's large, I think most people can grasp the severity of the situation with that and the opportunities with that.
Thank you for sharing that. So Darwin, I really want to kind of bring you in and your thoughts on, even from a perspective of why you think that there is this, I don't know, what can I say? The unions, that's what I want to talk about. I want to, because I think you spoke very eloquently a couple weeks ago, understanding that a franchise agreement, even, right now, our unions have their contracts for 5 years with SDG&E, right? And so as we're looking at a 5-year term, or rather, regardless of the number of that term, SDG&E's a term is only 5 years with them as well. Can you kind of share your opinions or your thoughts on the union supporting a longer SDG&E, although their SDG&E contracts are only for 5 years, and how other union members can actually benefit from a more progressive franchise agreement? Can you share your thoughts on that?
Thank you. And hopefully you can hear me, and I'm just driving back from North County. Okay. And I was just coming from an event for Sergio Wick, a young Latinx brother that was killed by the police here. It was his anniversary today, when he was shot 4 years ago. And I,
thank you for honoring him.
Yeah, and I appreciate you starting with this show about Congressmember John Lewis and C.T. Vivian. It's on their shoulders that we stand. I continue this social justice work from the street, environmental issues. And yeah, unions are a part of it. I will say I was really surprised at the city council hearing the amount of union people that were calling in and making it sound like SDG&E is this chummy company that just treats them really well. And please don't take my master away. It was really sad. And the truth is, of course, is those that, and Bill just listed them off, and others can talk about this more, but the other places that have taken over, that have the city control or county control over their energy, they're all union and they're all city employees. Most all of them I've heard about, and they get as good or better benefits. So it's sad, and I understand that if they, whatever, force their folks to testify, otherwise they would not get promoted at their job. I understand that. It's just sad, and I'm hoping our politicians are brighter than that. And then at some point, the other part that I was really intrigued by is the city council part. And I'll just say real quickly, when I was first introduced to Georgette Gomez, people that knew her and were telling me to vote for her were Goo gaga over her environmental record. That was her claim to fame, that she worked as an environmentalist. She's the real McCoy, get her in there. And I haven't heard anyone talk about her on this issue. And to me, that's the weirdest thing. She's the president of the city council. I don't see any champion for this issue with the city council. And that to me is, again, really bizarre. So yeah, I don't know a lot about the part about the union. Those were just kind of my off the cuff reaction to it.
No. Yeah, I just wanted to, thank you for sharing that. So this is a good discussion I want us to have. So, Darwin brought up a really good point as far as what I observed for the city council meeting is that we don't have a lot of experience negotiating a franchise agreement because it's been 50 years since it took place, right? So, I may not be 50 years yet. And even those that may, be, at least 50 or older, you weren't old enough to even pay attention. So we don't have that much experience. So one of the things I noticed was there's a lot of more deliberating that needs to take place. Like, it looks like our city council members don't necessarily have a good grip on what is benefiting, for our residents, and constituents. So who would like to chime in on that? Yeah, go ahead, Eddie, please.
It's not really that complicated. The original contract, though it has a lot of legalese in it, it's not really that complicated, right? And often I find in my life that when it becomes complicated, somebody's lying and somebody's cheating.
Or covering something up.
Right, or covering something up, right? And oftentimes I get told by SDG and the unions, oh, it's complicated, Eddie, don't worry about it. Well, tell me what you do know. Tell me what you do know.
Right.
Sometimes I gotta tell them I just look like this.
Are you still there, Eddie?
I know 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
But utility leases the land that they run their utility on.
The right of way.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're fine.
Basically, the thing is that they lease the land, City of San Diego land, that utilities run their stuff on, right? Their wires and their pipes for natural gas and the wires for the electricity. And that's almost in a nutshell what it is, right? There's a few other things, but that's the contentious part, right? And currently, the city of San Diego has according to the franchise agreement, they want to do a pure water system or something, and SDG&E needs to move a lot of their equipment, and they're refusing to move their equipment and suing the city of San Diego. And it's
well, the city's actually suing them.
Right. Well, both, right? It's kind of like a Trumpian solution. We'll just sue them and lock it up in court and they keep paying us. But it's basically that simple. They didn't, stand up to their side of the deal. Now they're saying, no, it's not like that. That's not what we signed.
So this is something, go ahead.
Well, it's just not as complicated as they make it seem, right?
I agree with you on that. And they using that phrase, they try to, talk over people's head, understand that even if there is some complexity, that we have the intelligence to, unpack it so we can understand. And that's what we're trying to do, is unpack this thing so our, communities understand, this is like one of the most valuable asset that the city has. My concern is this, is a couple of things, is that a 20-25 year agreement is equivalent today as the 50-year agreement we just came out of. Like as quickly, as modernized, as you mentioned earlier, Eddie, as how we're, regenerating our energy, renewable energy, and how we're moving, a 20-25 years is equivalent to a 50-year. So that's a major concern I have. And another is, how is their minimum bid not reflective of what standards? And why isn't it up to 7%? Why are they only, asked to pay less than 1% for a minimum bid? I don't know, Cody, Bill, did anyone want to chime? Oh, go ahead, Eddie.
And I believe and somebody can and will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but it's less than 1% for 1 year of economics, not for the whole duration of the contract, but less than 1 year. I mean, for 1 year is like, okay, there's going to be billions of dollars, multi-billions wires, and you want to give us $60 million? No.
65, right.
Right.
Yeah, and so to me, that's like reckless, right? And that's like, it's more than just a missed opportunity. And when you're trying to negotiate a deal, as you mentioned, Eddie, of $65 million of revenues just for 1 year, and yet it's a multi-billion-dollar agreement, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we got the city budgets cut. Cody, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I think all of us probably have perspective. I think, a perfect example of just how little many of these council members have the interests of your ratepayers and your citizens in mind is several council members were arguing, one, that we should accept in kind in lieu of actual fee, which is, who on earth would say, hey, I'm selling my house. Why don't you, I know I have bidders that are going to pay me cash, but why don't I also accept back rubs or whatever? It's insane. And then somebody actually asked about what was Kate asking for? He was asking for a promissory note. Now, that is like, you're actually a traitor to your city. If you're trying to get a promissory note in there, nobody on earth would say, we have lots of bidders who want to pay cash, but I'm going to fight for somebody to pay me to eat a hamburger today and pay me tomorrow. It's insane. And it shows just how little those people actually have the interests of ratepayers and citizens in their mind.
Okay, good point. So you're saying that we shouldn't take an IOU? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, and I would add to that, and that's supposed to be a fiscal conservative. I thought the Republicans were about good government. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. I mean, if you follow the logic of good government and how to spend money, then the best way is for the city to take control over the energy. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that SDG&E's defense is that no one else is doing this in the country. They're not arguing that the value is there. They're just saying that it hasn't been done elsewhere. Therefore, you can't do it because you'd be out in front.
They're saying what hasn't been done, Bill?
In having the utility pay the real value of the land, the lease of the land. And so Eddie's talking about 1% of the value in 1 year when you would be paying 120, 150 million a year for every year of the contract. That's just a standard lease payment. The city has other properties they lease, like the Mission Bay Hilton, like SeaWorld, and they get a certain amount of money per month for leasing that land. All the consultant was saying in his report is, if you did that with your electric utility and the land that they're using, you'd be collecting $2.3 billion in 20 years, or you'd be collecting 120 million. And SDG&E's response isn't that that is not correct or accurate. It's probably low, but their defense is nobody else is doing this. So don't you start here having us pay market value for the lease of this property. And so,
and they haven't been paying it, right? They didn't pay it for the, the previous 50 years and whatever. I think that one was even like almost tear-dropping sad.
I mean, anybody can get used to free rent. We can all get used to free rent, but at some point, the bill may come due.
And Sonja, I mean, I think several of the panelists pointed this out in testimony. You have to ask yourself, why are we structuring it to have a minimum bid? Why not just raise the franchise fee? Well, here's the catch, and this shows what a boondoggle the CPUC in general is, and why any franchise that is regulated by the CPUC will be gouging ratepayers. And that is this. SDG&E, you heard probably 27 of their people say, hey, we're paying you $65 million a year in franchise fee. Well, guess what? Actually, ratepayers are paying the franchise fee to themselves. And that's not just in theory. We actually pay rates, but in addition, we pay the base 1.1% out of our rates. But look on your bill, 5.778% is the fee franchise differential to cover the differential between the 1.1 that's your base and the 3 that we have. So we actually not only pay it out of our rates, we literally pay a surcharge to ourselves for SDG&E's franchise. And what did the consultant say? He said, look, you can raise this franchise fee to 4%, to 5%, to 20%. They'll just charge it to you. You cannot, through the franchise fee, get the shareholders to pay anything, which is why we have a minimum bid, to try to get the shareholders to pay instead of ourselves.
And thank you for breaking that down, Cody. And so when we know this, basic, economics, and when you are a for-profit, and they are a for-profit, and they have a right to make a profit, right? But not overly gouge, just incomprehensible to their ratepayers is a difference, right? And so every business, whether you are a for-profit or a nonprofit, there are costs, right? And so you have to pay, it's like the pay to play. So you have a cost, you have overhead. So your revenue minus your cost, it goes your profit. So to your point, Cody, they're even been cutting out having to pay what is required for them to do business. And we should not be okay with that. That at the end of the day, we should not be okay that we are actually, they're passing through, it's called a pass-through fee, and they're passing it on to us, and we're having. And then they're saying, as you mentioned, Cody, that what was it? The what did you call it? Bargain, the in-kind services.
Oh, yeah.
Like the in-kind service. Yeah, so this is the thing. We want our viewers to know, we want our residents to know that, is your right to engage on this topic. And Bill, can you kind of like break down even more of the value of this and kind of really give us more details of the significance of this at this time? From a timing perspective, we've talked about it before, that this could really be in the best timing for the city as the city is having budget cuts, right? And so. Right,
and that is this whole issue that Cody was talking about with the minimum bid, and Eddie was talking about that, $1 million a day in profit, and that a lot more of that should be going to the city, just normal business for leasing out property, but that the mayor back in April had projected a budget hole of about $150 million for this budget year, this fiscal year. And I mean, if you were to divide this minimum bid over 20 years, about $3 million a year, well, that's really not going to mean much of anything for a budget hole of $150 million a year. However, if you were getting market value for your franchise, that's more like 120, 150 million a year. It actually could largely fill the gap that the city is currently facing as a result of this pandemic.
Okay.
In addition, am I on mute? No.
No,
in
you're
addition,
good.
You know, this before the last 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years, the only people that were knowledgeable about this kind of stuff, the only people that really cared about this kind of stuff was like Bill and Cody, right? I didn't know nothing about none of this. My bill came, I paid it, and I paid what was ever in the little box in the bottom right-hand corner, and I paid real close attention to what color that box was. Because if the box was red, then
that means you was overdue.
More motivation to pay whatever the bill was, right? But with the advent of renewable energy and sustainable energy and climate change, more people have become interested in, okay, what's really going on here, right? Where is my energy coming from? How does it get here? What do you mean I could have solar panels on my roof and just get off of that stuff? What do you mean I could have rain barrels and water my garden? And we weren't into none of that. But now that the world and our communities are kind of waking up to this and understanding the significance that it plays in their life, and that they had absolutely no say-so. Utilities could go up to the CPUC, tell them anything they wanted to.
Exactly.
And they would say, yeah, okay.
Pretty much.
And then your bill goes up $20 or $30, and you don't
how
know
does that,
right?
And like, how does that happen? I mean, especially here, it happens based on that relationship, as you mentioned, Eddie, because we know that, I mean, year after year after year, our climate Avengers, this group that you guys are seeing here, we just help people, and they don't even know that they almost had a minimum bill of like $38, $39 that was, on the verge. So you're right. If we're not engaged and we don't know what's happening, as you mentioned, as Bill is one of those watchdogs, that keeps point on what's happening, at the California Public Utilities Commission, as well as Cody. So right now, let's talk about, because my phone is blowing up, you guys, and so I can't see some of these questions that are coming through, but there are certain comments that people are sending, so people are really watching this and are very interested in it. So I kind of want to just like really break down what we're looking at and what is the option. And Cody, I want to ask you is that, as we're looking at our different options, can you share with us what could definitely be a different option? What does the city report say about renewing their franchise agreement, right? And actually maybe becoming a MUD, a municipal utility department. Can you, give some details on that?
Yeah, so we formed a coalition called Public Power San Diego, which is advocating for a city-owned public utility. So far as we understand the situation, there is really no way, given the regulation from the CPUC, given the nature of investor-owned utilities, there is no way we are going to solve this problem without ultimately having a city-owned public utility. That's just the bottom line. We can talk about what, as Darwin said, we can talk about what master we serve, but one way or another, whether it's Berkshire Hathaway or Sempra, we are going to be taking working families. We're going to, and really, we have to get back to this core. The fundamental inequality in our society is between asset owners and wage earners. And the Federal Reserve.
Again, Cody, I think our viewers need to hear this.
Between asset owners and wage earners. Assets have inflated 170% since 1979. And wages have risen 12%. And all the institutions of our government are here to prop up asset owners. That is property owners, real estate owners, stock owners, equity owners. And so if you have a Federal Reserve that pumped $31 trillion into assets during the financial crisis, they've pumped another $4 to $6 trillion into assets now to keep up all these asset prices, but they're doing nothing for wages. $1,700 here, $1,700 there, nothing for wages. So really, ultimately, what we're doing, if we do not have public power, we are going to be taking wage earners and taking their meager income and giving it to asset owners. That's the fundamental reality. So that's why Public Power San Diego is 100% for municipal power for a public-owned energy utility. That's what we're for.
And that's dismantling, the systemic issues that's been happening that, frankly, that is built on, as you mentioned. It's the affordability issue here in San Diego is astronomical, right? We rank not the most expensive. We have different metrics. I'm literally saying affordability. We rank within like the top 5. And sometimes I think in 2017, we were the least affordable place to live. So we have ranked, and we've been second, we've been first, we are there. So you're making a really great point of where we can help relieve, where our income, is coming from, because it's still somewhat of a gross, because you got to net out what you still have to pay. So a question that I'm getting from some of the viewers is, has if the city council doesn't know why, like if they don't know all the details, and because again, that's another reason why I don't think we should do 20 years, right? Because we need to be more experienced and knowing and have integral details, what to even look for, even from an audit perspective, from a compliance perspective, there's so many, compartments to a franchise agreement for your utilities that we need to have that experience. And if you keep going 50 years, 25 years, what you're doing is you're not even allowing those that are in government to help govern from a space of expertise, right? So one of the questions is that if the city council, don't have these details or information, why not have them use a best practice from another city? And so we know that just right up in LA, Sempra, they just renewed a 5-year agreement, right? Bill, do you want to give us some details on that? As well as some other best practices,
Sure. Yeah, and that has been, it's interesting, Sonja, because this process for me started about 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. We were trying to plant the seed with the city council and these committees that look, the state of the art is a lot better than what we've got. And one of those options, and all of it was framed from the standpoint that if we can't get these state-of-the-art elements in this agreement, we should municipalize. We should take it and go public, because we need that capability to actually fulfill our climate action plan, to do it in an equitable way, to do it locally, to get economic, all the good things we'd like to do with energy now. And so you brought up this extension of the LA County, SoCalGas, Sempra franchise agreement, 5 years. We have put before the city the Salt Lake City agreement, 5 years. Minneapolis, 5 years up there. They have Salt Lake City, Minneapolis, they have aspirations for dealing with climate change. And so they put in requirements from their franchisee to assist them to cooperate. And so another part of state of the art is we want a cooperative partner. We don't want someone running to the PUC constantly undercutting the local objectives. And
come on, Bill. That's right. Yes.
A problem, this has been a problem forever with regulatory agencies and regulated monopolies. The monopolies know if we can co-opt 3 out of 5 votes, we own them, and we can just jack up the rates, boondoggle after boondoggle, and we are boondoggle central in San Diego. SoCalGas, Sempra, SDG&E owns the California Public Utilities Commission. That's the only reason our rates are through the roof. And so
that's the problem. Go ahead.
Yes, and another aspect of this is one that has been a bit of a sleeper, but in order to exercise this public option, we need to buy out the poles and wires and pipes that the SDG&E owns. So who's going to value that? Who's going to say how much it's worth? And what the consultant did, and it's a mixed bag. A consultant working for the city came up with a report. We've read the report. There's some good, there's some bad, but one interesting thing he brought up is you need a smooth pathway out of this franchise agreement to go public, meaning some third party. It's like having a bank of judges determine your political districts, so you don't gerrymander all over the place. Is a panel that says, hey, it's worth $2 billion. If the city decides they want to go for it, it's worth $2 billion. We're not going to haggle in court for 10 years. So that's another part of best practices, is a simple, fast way to identify the value, reasonable value, and then you move. And then finally, what we've already talked about, which is the city should get fair market value for its property. I mean, if they should be getting 150 million a year for the property, that's what they get. If they lease it out to anyone else, that's what they get. We shouldn't be grateful to get 2 million or 3 million a year when it's worth 150 million. So those are some examples of best practices.
Right. And so one of go.
If I may add back to one of Bill's points about the city council people and how they're swayed one way or another, that's one issue. But we also have another issue, and I call it the chicken dinner issue, right?
Bring it, Eddie. I already know that chicken dinner.
Or churches or
the gala.
They need to do, they'll give them $25,000 or $30,000.
Yeah, for the gala.
At your dinner, but they won't even go to the dinner. They'll buy a table and tell you to give the tickets away. However, when it's time for issues like this pop up, they call on those people to call into city council, to call in, and then people have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
They haven't talked to anybody. They're just given a set of talking points, and that confuses our already confused city council people. They're like,
in our communities.
You know, Pastor so-and-so or Deacon so-and-so or, you know, the church or whatever, is like, okay, we selling out for crumbs.
And so they, and like you said,
$1 million a year and you getting 25 grand?
And Eddie, but it's like they're covering that. They just want to cover, as you mentioned, whatever that donation they get for their gala at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? Versus
when on the other side, if I may go a little further, on the other side, if they looked at some land they may own out in Imperial Valley or up in the mountains and put a solar array on that and sold energy, a long-term agreement to the CCA, this CCA or any other CCA, they would get a lot more than $23,000, $25,000, $100,000 a year.
Right.
So, you know, we're always looking at it from a defensive standpoint. We need to battle this and we need to battle that. No, we need to sit down collectively and come up with a long-term strategy like SDG has to say, okay, we're going to deal with this franchise agreement. Then we're going to deal with a municipality for this. And we may just deal with it in the city of San Diego, or we may partner with the San Diego Community Power and put it in the other 4 cities that are part of the JPA. Okay.
I like the way you think, Eddie.
Conversation, because
but I mean, but that's what but that's what leadership is supposed to do is provide that long-term visionary, right? That is not even something that you carry out, but you set it up for those that are in term after you are able to follow that roadmap, if you will, for that overall vision that is for the greater good and for our communities. I mean, so that's what leadership that I have studied under, you know, that's the leadership that I respect and honor. So another thing, as we're talking about the Public Utilities Commission, is that, you know, in doing research and being involved and engaged with these topics and with this matter, that, you know, literally, we're looking at all these different cities and all these states, but it's approximately around 200 commissioners, you know, countrywide, right? So if you're looking at who owns most from an environmental and climate justice perspective, when we're looking at who owns or who's contributing, maybe not own, but who's contributing to most of our emissions and carbon, you're looking at approximately 200 people across the country, right? So being able to have that public policy to make yourself even more independent, you know, or even knowing who you need to, develop those relationships, or, create other opportunities such as a MUD, because your current investor on utilities is already, in bed with the Public Utilities Commission, right? So just putting like things in perspective, sometimes, we are granular in our details, but when we kind of look it up from like more of a 50-foot view, that we only, across the country, we only have roughly around 200 commissioners that, now they're the ones who's going to be responsible for those, our carbon emissions. So as far as go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You finish.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Darwin.
Okay. I just want to add, I appreciate this discussion. One of the things that I do think is just kind of odd is these folks have names, and not only do the city council members have names, but a good chunk of them are running for higher office. And I worry about our inability to connect dots, or at least to do this in public settings. If they're not in support of something like with the city taking over the energy, lowering the rates, keeping union jobs, and having better environmental issues for us, then I'm not sure how in that sense we reward them with letting them run for higher office and them winning. In the sense that, as you just said, with leadership, if they're not showing that, it should make a difference. And I think that's a really key issue, because this should be, and I don't know, maybe I'm misreading it, but this should be a really hot political issue, and it should really matter what their position is on this. But I don't get that sense from it, and I hope that's off base, that this becomes a really hot issue, and
That's
it really
why
does
we're
matter
here,
what the
Darwin.
position.
Darwin, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think this whole panel agrees with you. This should be a very hot issue. So I have a quick question from some of our viewers, and they're saying, wow, so we're stuck with our California Public Utilities Commission is on the hook, and the city council may or may not have all the information to make that informed decision. What is the end game? So, putting it out there. Eddie, would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah. No, we're not stuck, right? The power is in the people and the politics they address, right? That is one of my favorite Tupac quotes, right?
Say that again. Give it to us.
The power is in the people and the politics they address.
Come on now.
I mean, the CPUC is they're not God. They're not,
That's right.
They got addresses. They got names. They got, until it becomes important to us in general, which it's starting to do now with the advent of CCAs and renewable energy and sustainability and tree lovers and all that kind of stuff. It's not like there's nothing we can do, right? Mm-hmm. We just need to be able to, when it hits our front door is when it becomes important, right? And so those of us that are in leadership positions outside of politics need to find a way to get it to people's front door so they care about it, right? And because
I agree with
caring, those commissioners, their seat is not in stone, right? That's a whole different game that they have to go through, right? And they have to get appointed. And so it's back to the politicians and the people that appoint them. So we don't have to talk to Eddie Price, the commissioner. Who the hell appointed Eddie Price? That's who we need to talk to, right? And that goes to Darwin's point about these people are ascending to higher office, and they're dropping morals on their way up the ladder. You know what I mean? By the time they get to the top of the ladder, they done lost all their morals, values, and community love. So to that question, we just get more involved. We just get more involved and support, people like Darwin and Cody and Bill and yourself. You know what I mean? And we have a responsibility to learn how to speak to people's front door and what makes it important to them, because everybody got a problem with how much they pay for energy.
Everybody. So on that, everybody, I agree. So Eddie, on that, as this theme I'm hearing, right? What you said, what Darwin said, the comments I'm getting in, thank you. Thank you, my sister, for hooking me up. So I'm seeing some of the comments that people are seeing it. I know that the NAACP San Diego I know that the Racial Justice Coalition, as well as even CPI and some other organizations, and Eddie, I want to ask you, we have agreed to have a town hall meeting for our community to address this franchise agreement so people understand, so they're not just, as you mentioned earlier, they're not only hearing this topic from one side of the lens or one side of the coin from someone who has an alternative motive because they want to protect that $5,000 donation they get, right? So I'm going to ask you too, if you're willing to partner with us and collaborate as we're looking at scheduling this town hall meeting, really soon, like in the next, couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm willing. My organization is willing. But you do know I cuss a little bit every now and then when I get riled up, right? So I ain't did that on here because Leonard knows where I live, my wife and all that kind of stuff. But you put me out in an open setting, you might hear some other language.
We know, Eddie, you know how to reel it in when it's time. You know how to give it just right when it's time, like you've done today. So thank you. You have, you've hit the nail.
Oh, I'm about to cut somebody out right after this show.
Look, no, I just appreciate who you are and what you bring. So we're like only a few minutes out. I want everyone to kind of give their pitch on, what the future, what the opportunities look like for us as San Diegans here, in our county. Cody, you want to go first, and I'll go Darwin, and then Bill, and then Eddie. I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, look, I would say to Eddie's point, this is, I'm an anthropologist. Anthropology, we would call, or sociology, we would call this a collective action problem. Mm-hmm. And so many of the things we're facing, like climate change, housing, homelessness, wealth inequality, they're all collective action problems. We know what the problem is. We know what the solutions are. It's just a question of whether we can get our communities to implement them, to make the sacrifices necessary to resolve them. So I'd say, again, Eddie's dead on. We need to build a mass movement. It's about organizing. It's about speaking to whoever's behind that door. When you're knocking on a door, what keeps that person up at night? How do you articulate what your vision, your solutions to their problem in terms of what keeps that person up at night, in terms of their existing system of meaning, what matters to them? And if you can do that, then we can build a mass movement. But if we don't have a mass movement and it's just an inside game, we will not achieve transformative change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Darwin. Thank you, Cody.
Yeah. I'll just say real quick, simple, courage. San Diego politicians are weak-kneed to me. They don't have the courage to literally do the right thing. The sky won't fall, the world won't end. We can have city power and control over it, and people actually will love and respect you for that.
I agree. And I will have to give a shout out to, one of our city councils that, steps up with that courage and is willing to buck the system. Okay, Miss Montgomery, that's it, Monica Montgomery. Okay, Bill, can you kind of give us a pitch on, as our direction as we move forward?
Sure. A lot has happened in the last couple of months. And so I talked about working on this a couple of years ago. It was kind of working out in the wilderness for a while, but in the last few months, this has gotten hot. And for a couple of reasons, and for a couple of the people here on this call, have really jacked up the community fire on this. And a lot of it has been public power. It is, let's go public, doesn't work with an investor-owned utility. We can't get there with it. And that's really driving a lot more ambitious talk at the city council. You saw what happened. We got a 5-4 vote, even though it was chaotic. Who thought we would get a 5-4 vote that knocked that down? Yeah. And it's like happening every day. It's getting more momentum. And so we're in a very dynamic situation here where this is a 50-year agreement. They're talking about 20 years. We were talking about 5, and now we're thinking, let's think bigger and let's take it as far as we can take it, because we might not get another shot like this for a long, long time. And so it is an exciting moment that we don't know where this is going to end, and we didn't think it was going to go too far, but now it's moving.
Yes, great. Thank you, Bill. I love that. Let's think big. Eddie, can you give us your final thoughts on this? You're on mute.
Yeah, because I really need to go somewhere and cuss out some lizards or something. you know, as we talk about leadership in this space, I think what we fail to realize, and I think it's to my point earlier, anybody that has a front door and has an electric bill is a leader of that bill. They're a leader, their responsibilities are to that bill, and they have a voice in this process, right?
Right.
And that's how you empower people. It's like, don't look to me. At your address, you're the leader, and you have an electric bill that is going buck wild. What do you have to say about that? Here goes some information, right? That's one of the reasons why I got together with a couple of other people and created the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition, is because we needed a vehicle other than this one, which is a great vehicle, to get this information out, right? These decisions should not be made in a bubble.
That's
they
right.
should not be made at 202 C Street, right? They should be made at home, and we should tell our leaders what we want them to do. Again, the power is in the people, in the politics they address.
Come on now.
And so we're just trying to create a method and a means and the knowledge necessary so that they can address this issue. This is a lot of money.
A lot.
And it is based all upon whether or not the sun comes up.
That's right.
And so, you know, I've said this for a few years now. If the sun comes up, we got action. We have an economic base just because the sun came up. We don't have to dig nothing. We don't have to plant nothing. We don't have to watch nothing grow. We just got to put a little piece of glass out there and hope the sun goes over it, right? And that creates an economic base. And so, again, to my point earlier, and I'll shut up then, you know, with Bill and Cody and people that have been in this a while, hoping that the rest of us would wake up and get in the game. I think we've woken up and now we're in the game, right? Because I pay an electric bill, right? And I shouldn't have to pay the one that I'm paying. You know, we're not just the highest rate in California. We're one of the highest rate in the country.
That's right.
Really? Okay, and you're trying to validate charging us more? So, I don't know. That's all I got to say.
I appreciate that. Yes, I definitely.
Out there that looked at me crazy. I'm about to go check.
So I want to share that I appreciate this panel. You know, as I have said, I use the term climate Avengers, and I use it very from a place of endearing, that they all have been in this space throughout a duration of time for you as our viewers, our listeners, but yet we need more climate Avengers. So we're asking for you to currently stay engaged, connect with us, and let your voice be heard. Understand that this franchise agreement is a multi-billion with a B, a multi-billion-dollar deal, and 65 million, you should feel insulted that if that's the only amount that the city of San Diego gets. You know, it almost makes me very sad to think that someone would be willing to take $65 million in the middle of a pandemic when budgets are cut and needs are going up. It is, again, it really does, it saddens me, but yet it also motivates me. And we need your voice. We need to make sure that you understand this. We will have a town hall on this topic, so stay tuned on that. We understand that, you know, this conversation is about equity and the means of the equity as we prioritize Black Americans to realize our fullest, highest value, as well as all communities. And we understand that communities of color has suffered the most in this country. Next week, you should probably hear from our census crew. And then following that, we're going to have a candidate series. So thanks a lot for tuning in.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I would challenge everybody that's listening to this and plans to attend the virtual town hall, start looking at your energy bill.
Right. You see that franchise degree on there.
Yeah. Look at it this month, look at it next month, and look at it the month after that, and watch how those rates go up and down just because they say so.
And when we have a press conference, bring your bill with you.
Right. Right.
So we can wave it in the air because we do care. Okay, so we're going to wave it in the air because we care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to S.U.N. We'll see you next week.